Hey, everybody, welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Stuart Cranes, and today I am joined by not only an amazing guest, amazing entrepreneur, but somebody that is actually near and dear to my heart, very good friend of mine. This individual is an author, she's a speaker, she is also all over social media helping small businesses and coaches alike grow their brands from the ground up. So, Sabrina Suarez, super happy to have you here on the show. Thank you for joining us today.
I'm super happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And again, can't wait to dive in. But first, I would love to hear a bit more. How did you get into social media as a way to, not only make a living for yourself, but make an impact on the world?
Yeah, so I've always been kind of like behind the curve with social media, ironically. And I'm someone who has had to learn things by doing, very hands-on, very like trial and error kind of person. And I first got into social media doing exactly that. Like I
Mhm.
downloaded Instagram after it had been out for a little while. I downloaded TikTok after it had been out for a little while. And I've always just kind of like gone in with an open mind and with a very like curious spirit and like figured out what it is that I wanted to do on each platform and figured out like what really felt authentic and suited to me. I don't think that there was like one place in which I entered the social media game. But I think that over the years, I've had many opportunities to just like really get to know this thing and like really have fun using it.
Yeah. Well, tell me a bit more about that. Like, how is it fun in using it each and every day? I think a lot of people thinking about business, thinking about having an online brand, it kind of has like a heavy weight to it. So tell me a bit more about fun and how you create that.
Yeah. So I always tell people I see social media as a relationship building tool. I mean, I have had the amazing opportunity to be able to create connection with so many people from so many different places using social media. Even like some of my friends now that I consider to be some of my best friends, like I couldn't say that unless we had at some point reconnected or connected on social media. And so I have just so much to be thankful for when it comes to this tool. And I really root myself in that first and foremost, like just the gratitude for what it has allowed me to do. Um, and then like it's just a space for me to be creative outside of that. And I think creativity has always been a source of fun for me. I identify as a creative. I dip my toes into everything when it comes to creativity, like photography and painting and drawing and writing and all of the things. So this is essentially an extension of that. And I think when it comes to people being able to access that for themselves, I think it's important for them to be able to look at like what do they enjoy and making this super expansive space about what they enjoy. Almost like hyper fixating on the joy so that they can actually like have fun with it again and play with it again, play with the types of content that they're making, play with the ability to connect with people in a bunch of different ways using a
Mhm.
bunch of different avenues. You know what I mean? Like it's a place of so much possibility and growth and learning and entertainment and inspiration. And I just really try to lean into that.
Mhm. Yeah, 100%. And I think maybe a follow-up question because you work with, small businesses, entrepreneurs, solopreneurs getting their brands off the ground and thi- you know, social media I think for a lot of people is almost feels like a necessary evil. And you just mentioned a lot about the connection that's available, the joy that's available. I even heard you say maybe not directly, but like the authentic expression available. How do you help your clients find that type of connection and authenticity and joy when social media is just another facet of their business?
Yeah, I feel like I try to find what makes that person really like unique and lit up and like you're saying, like really what feels authentic to them and almost like exploit that. So if someone is really good at writing and not necessarily so good at speaking to the camera, if they try to go in speaking to the camera every single day, try to make it's going to feel heavy. It's going to feel like, I don't like to
Mm,
do this. I don't want to do this. It's harder. You know what I mean? Like, versus if they can write something like a full story out in 10 minutes and then put it as a text overlay in a video, something like that. You know what I mean? Like, and it feels much more authentic. They connect with their audience and the people that they're wanting to much more authentically and easier. Like, it's less of a lift. Then do that. It's finding what works for that person, and instead of like working against it, working with it.
mm. I love that. And, I think it's interesting because what you're saying seems almost directly the opposite of a lot of the messaging about social media that ironically is on social media. We think about the Gary Vaynerchuks of the world who have built these massive followings. If you're somebody, if you're telling somebody who's brand new, getting started, wants to develop their own following in whatever niche, where do you feel like they should be focusing their efforts? Like, is there a platform that they should be focusing on, or how would you advise them?
I would say first and foremost, be clear about what they want to accomplish, like what their goals are, what they're envisioning, and then secondarily, like really hone in on what it is that their people are actually going to resonate with too, and then
Mhm.
try to marry the two in a way that does feel authentic, does actually like support their uniqueness and like and really like showcase and express their uniqueness and their brand. Um and then from there, like start doing the things that feel good to do and expand from there. Like, don't make it harder than it needs to be. Really like start the thing with that clarity in mind. And then just like be consistent, make it a part of your
Mhm.
routine. Like really understand like everything that you're sharing online is an opportunity to connect, and it's like a conversation you're having with someone, same way we're having a conversation right now. So it's like, what is the intention behind that conversation? What do you want to get communicated in that conversation? What kind of feeling do you want to be evoking in that conversation? And just make sure that that's aligned to your overall vision and mission.
I love that. Something you said kind of sparked something here. What do you feel like is the parallel between the connection that you're making on social media versus the connection you're making with folks offline?
I personally don't think it's any different. And I think that what has allowed me to make the impact that I have had online, and what really works for me in social media is like my social media is an extension of myself. So
Mhm.
everything that you see online is really me. It's not just my highlights, it's everything. And I think that when I go in that way and I approach it in that way, it allows for the possibility to connect with so many more people versus if I'm like, there's an in-person me and then there's an online me and then there's this, then there's that. Like, it strips the authenticity from the
Mm,
thing, and thus the ability to truly connect, you know? And I know sometimes there's fear around like, what should I put online? What shouldn't I put online? You know what I mean? Like that's a very personal conversation. And I think everybody should determine where their boundary is and honor that boundary for sure. And I think that there's ways to go about things that do truly like still have that authentic expression and create that authentic connection. Um, that doesn't have to be different than any conversation that someone's having.
got it. No, I realize you just said it's a personal thing, like personal boundaries. We get to have them. I mean, I tell my clients all the time that boundaries are an act of self-kindness. It's where I begin and you begin. It's where I end and you end. And um, but you also mentioned something about connection, and it often requires vulnerability. And I feel like for a lot of entrepreneurs online, or really anybody, doesn't have to be entrepreneurial. Like there is a level of pressure to be vulnerable in an online space. And how do you assess like for yourself or for your clients, like what vulnerability gets to look like in a public setting such as social media?
Yeah, I really like the saying, like, you can only meet other people as deeply as you've met yourself. And I think that
Mm,
this applies here because how I'm going to go about sharing something very personal to me is going to directly relate to how deeply I feel that thing, how much I've healed that thing, how comfortable I feel being vulnerable in whatever area of life I'm sharing in, you know what I mean? Um, and I think like when it comes to understanding that for ourselves, it really is about understanding ourselves.
mhm,
Like I know where my limit is because I've hit it and I've also just like created the space to explore those things for myself. And like I've always like kind of like teetered on the line of like being super vulnerable and also being like remaining relevant to what it is that I'm trying to say. You know what I mean?
mhm,
Um, I think that there's a temptation to say, like, "Oh, well, if you're vulnerable, then like, what does it have to do with business? Or if you're vulnerable, like, what do people care? You know what I mean? Like all the kind of conversations come up that could prevent us from doing the thing. And I think like just sitting with like, okay, like what actually feels true to me and what again feels good to me sharing in this online space. That could be even sharing it in a way that's not just directly one-on-one, like speaking it like, hey, this bad thing happened to me and this is how I overcame it and that whole thing. I really love like poetry and writing
mhm,
as a means of sharing those more vulnerable things. It feels safer to me. And
mhm.
that's not for everybody, you know what I mean? Some people are just the like, I'm going to tell you an entire conversation and like that's how I choose to communicate. That's what
Yeah,
that does
yeah.
to me, and that's what feels good. But I think it is another one of those personal things that everybody kind of gets to suss out. And the beauty of it is like you can't necessarily do it wrong. Like
Mhm.
there's so many opportunities to be able to figure that out. And just like anybody figuring out what their boundaries are, like it takes a little bit of trial and error.
Sure, of
You
course.
toe the line a little bit, you know what I mean?
100%. So I'm neglected to mention this earlier for anybody listening, but Sabrina, our guest today, is actually somebody that comes to the world of coaching with a social work background. So she actually is very well qualified to answer questions like this. And to that point, you're talking about the vulnerability, the connection piece, and like you said, only being able to meet somebody to the depth at which you've met yourself, which is an amazing quote. I've actually never heard that before. If you're somebody, take social media out of it for this one, but if you're somebody who's just beginning to look inward for the first time, you don't really know what's there, but you know that there's work to be done, let's say. How would you advise that individual to get started in doing that deeper work for themselves?
I would say start with the most basic sense of self-awareness. I
Mm,
think anytime we're trying to evoke change, like it takes a certain level of self-awareness.
mhm,
And that is something that can be super scary right off the bat to do. I mean, especially you and I are in the US, but like especially for people that are within our kind of like culture where it's like, don't look at that. Avoid it at all costs. Like we will choose any coping mechanism sometimes to be able to not look at something. And it doesn't serve us ultimately, right? Because then we're just like in this habitual kind of like unhealthy cycle which doesn't allow us to create any sort of change and you know really ultimately just keeps us in the same place, keeps us stagnant. So what I would say with this the self-awareness piece is like really just start to sit and look at like who am I, what are my tendencies, what are my habits, like even just taking stock of your feelings every day,
mhm,
not going on autopilot and like just like going through the motions, taking the action, sitting with some sort of sense of, okay, like this is how I reacted today, or this is how I felt in response to a thing that happened. You know what I mean? I think a beautiful way to start doing that is like journaling,
Mhm.
and like doing it for yourself, talking to yourself. I know when I first started journaling, I was still talking for another person. Like I was
Mm.
still writing in my journal with like another person in mind, like, oh, if someone reads this, you know what I mean? Versus just like writing and being my own kind of like witness and really just neutrally observing what happened in my day, how I felt about things, and like understanding that no, this is just for me. This is a conversation with myself for me to get to know myself better. I think that's huge when starting with that like, self-awareness and growing that self-awareness.
Yeah, absolutely. And other things that work that have worked for myself and for some of my coaching clients is journaling, like you said, meditation works great. And sometimes it's even just going for a walk or exercising, but doing so unplugged.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to listen to music, you don't have to listen to a podcast, but just spending that committed time with yourself, your own thoughts and feelings, and allowing yourself to process those things, is important. I guess a follow-up question though for you, Sabrina, is doing this, you know, kind of like deeper inner work where you're reflecting inward is challenging at times for people, can be scary. Like there sometimes is confronting things that have been pushed to the side, pushed down for whatever reason, past hurts or traumas. If those types of things are coming up for people, what type of support should they look for in continuing to do the work, but also allowing themselves to be supported for the things that might be overwhelming that they're uncovering?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a big advocate for seeking support in the form of some professional. So like I've had multiple therapists, I've been the therapist for other people in the past. I've done coaching and that kind of thing where I hold like a very therapeutic safe space. I've had that for myself as well. I've invested in coaches that have done the same for me. I've just had really good friends and family who have been able to do that too. I would say like it's a lifelong journey, right? Like
Mhm.
getting to know ourselves over and over and over again as we're evolving, as we're going through our life experiences. And we are people that really like deserve a sense of community and deserve to be supported in the ways that feel most comfortable to us. So once again, like determine what support feels like for you and is best for you, and ask for it. Invest in it. You know what I mean? Like I love verbally processing things. So a
Mhm.
therapist or like having some really close friends that I can call at any point in time, like that's important to me. And I have been in spaces where I didn't ask for that support or I didn't have the friendships or the means, and it felt very isolating and it did
Mm.
not serve me, in me being able to just like grow and heal and learn and all of that. So really going back to like, okay, what really feels good to me? What do I need? And then asking for that.
Yeah, 100%. And, I think maybe tying this back to social media, where we started this conversation, you often in a lot of places, particularly on Instagram, though, I find people are just showing the highlight reel, right? They're showing the best possible, versions of themselves at all time. It's the vacation, it's the amazing dinner, it's the awesome date they went on, it's the courtside seats at whatever sporting event. Like, how does doing this work, like doing that work, getting to know oneself, actually allow yourself to become a better entrepreneur?
Yeah. I I think that this is so important, and I'm so glad you asked this question. I feel like in order for you to be able to show up for other people, you need to understand what it means to show up for yourself.
Mm.
And showing up for yourself allows you to see yourself, and by extension on social media, allowing yourself to be seen. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Um when we're able to like really go to that depth within ourselves, we're not afraid of what's down there, and we're not afraid to like really work with what's going on. I think that we just have so much more to give. Um, especially as we're talking about like relationship building and connection, right? Like if we don't touch upon the struggles as well as the triumphs, as well as the desires, as well as the like shameful things, like if we don't address the wide variety of experiences happening for our audience and ourselves within that, like we're we're losing out. We're losing out on so many things, like connection being the basis of that, but we're losing out on the potential to actually support people with what it is that we have.
Hmm.
Because anytime you're offering something to somebody, it's to solve some sort of problem. It is to find some sort of solution and provide some sort of product or service that is going to enhance someone's life. Like that is marketing, that is branding, that is
Yeah.
business, you know? So if we like essentially look away or like avoid these kinds of things for ourselves, like we limit the impact that we can have,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and just the goals that we can reach too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess I would love to know, like, do you have an example? Obviously, don't name names, but anybody that you've worked with, whether it's directly as one of your social media clients or just somebody you've observed that you've seen this growth in them and their ability to provide more for the world as a result of doing this type of work.
Yeah. So I'm going to use myself as an example. I would say the first few years that I was in business, I was closed off to myself. I was
Mm,
someone who was not willing to look at my stuff. I got very defensive. I struggled with empathy. Like I remember at one point in time, like literally writing down what is empathy and like Googling it because I
wow.
struggled so hard. Yeah, came from a spot where I just didn't have those kind of conversations, you know, with my family, with my friends. Like it was too vulnerable. It was too much and I wasn't ready to go there. And then I, over time, started introducing myself to more things like more podcasts, doing more trainings, talking to different people, and really digging deeper, you know, and hiring different therapists and coaches and things like that, which really supported me to like get more comfortable talking about the things that made me uncomfortable originally, the things that were super vulnerable. And as I started just gaining that comfortability with myself, doing it in my own life, like my own personal life, I then started having that translate online. And just the quality of clients that I've gotten, or the overall feedback, engagement that I've gotten from people as I've had that kind of like progression and evolution happen has been so, so good. And I'm so grateful, but it has started with me being able to look at those things and have those kind of conversations with myself. My business really struggled in those first 2 years where I didn't know I
Yeah.
didn't know myself like that. You know what I mean? It was very superficial, the things that I was sharing, or it was very um limited because it was what I felt safe sharing at the time. You know,
Yeah.
like I could share a quote every day because someone else wrote it. Someone else was taking the risk. Someone else was being vulnerable. Versus today, like I write poetry every day. And it's my deepest stuff coming out, right? And I share stories on my social media about really impactful, like challenging things that have happened in my life. And I relate it back to my overall mission and vision and supporting other people and feeling empowered and to in their own expression and, you know, like being true to themselves and being authentic to themselves in these online spaces. And all of that is because I chose to do it for myself first, and then I could do it for other people. And the results again have just been so, so great.
I love that. That's amazing. I'm like sitting here on the edge of my seat, just like eating up everything you're saying. So something that came to mind listening to you share all that, and again, thank you for being a part of this. I hope I hope for those of you that are listening, you've been taking notes. Sabrina's just been dispensing wisdom here. But going back to the vulnerability piece, because we just keep seeming to get back to that over and over again as a part of this conversation. How is that vulnerability, as you've discussed it, it has led to, you getting to know yourself, getting, the results you've wanted in your business, but how is that tied to your personal power?
Ooh, my personal power. I would say it has made me more comfortable with myself. It has made me the person that I am. Yeah, I think of this Sabrina from a few years ago that was just so scared to touch upon certain things. You know what I mean? Like, I had experienced so much trauma in my life,
Hmm.
and I didn't even begin to process that until years after it happened. And for me, it was like I was going through the motions, but I wasn't actually living to my fullest potential. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
I wasn't my fully expressed, authentic self. It was, again, what I felt safe sharing. And
Mm.
so, like, as I've been able to become more comfortable being vulnerable, and I've healed those things, what I have found to be safe sharing now in my personal and professional life has expanded because I feel safe within myself, right?
Hmm.
And that has just contributed to my personal power. You know what I mean? Like, I think back to our example of boundaries, where in order to even in order to enforce a boundary, we need to be comfortable with ourselves. You know what I mean? We need to be vulnerable enough to say, this is not okay with me, even if it's okay with someone else. We need to be brave enough to be okay with the consequences of enforcing a boundary, whatever that might be, right? And as I've gotten better acquainted with myself and really understood for myself, like, what is not okay and what makes me feel a certain way, which is vulnerable for me to share. Like, as I've gotten well acquainted with that, I have then been able to take the next step, which is the expression of that is sharing with others. Like, I need this. This gets to be respected for me to feel okay or safe in this space, in this relationship. You know what I mean? That has really been a catalyst for me in, like, growing everything. The quality of my relationships, the amount of relationships that I have, my social media presence, like, everything. That to me is like personal empowerment, is being able to speak up like that. So yeah, it's definitely contributed to my life in so many ways, and also then by extension my clients' life,
Hmm.
because I'm doing something right, and then I'm able to share and walk people through that journey themselves and be able to have them have similar experiences because I've already done it and I know how to get there, quote unquote.
I love it. It's amazing. And I appreciate you speaking into really just the idea of a comfort zone and how you have to step outside of it in order to make it bigger. And by stepping outside of our comfort zone, just a reminder for everybody listening, like, is truly the only way we create the lives we want, right? The only way we achieve a goal that we've never accomplished before. Like, you're actually creating that muscle memory for yourself as you go, especially, if you've never made $100,000 in a year, or you've never been below a certain weight. Like, it takes you doing things that you haven't done before in order to get results you've never seen. So, want to acknowledge you, Sabrina, because throughout this conversation, you've touched on over and over again the steps you've taken to get where you want to go. What's the next couple of steps for you?
I think it's just deepening the practice of everything that I'm doing. Honestly, what I've come to know as someone who's very goal oriented and like a big vision person
Hmm.
is that there's always going to be something else. There's always going to be the next thing, the bigger thing, the thing that I haven't tried yet. And for me, I've made a practice of just trying new things. I've made a practice of building and growing. It's who I am. And so for me, it's just remaining consistent in that and just being open to what that could look like, especially as someone who likes to know. Like, I like to know, like, what is the next thing? What am I doing? All that kind of stuff. But for me, it's like just trusting, again, like being vulnerable enough to say sometimes, like, I don't know, and I want to grow and I want to learn. What do I get to do in order to do that so that I can accomplish the next thing? Um, it's remaining open to every single possibility, ones I haven't even dreamed of yet. And within that, going back to the trust piece, like deepening the practice of trust for sure.
I love that. Love that. What does trust currently look like for you? And how would you encourage one of your clients to lean into trust?
Trust for me looks like speaking up for myself. It looks like honoring myself in any space that I'm operating. So whether that be online or in my relationships or even in my own home, like, what does it look like to truly honor myself? Keeping promises to myself.
Mhm.
Really regulating my nervous system when I feel like I don't know what's going to happen. It's being my best caretaker, my best friend, like having my back, all of those kinds of things. Um, and like having my actions reflect that for sure. And then what I would say for someone trying to build trust with themselves, first and foremost, is start with doing the things that honor you. So if that's, like leaving the party an hour earlier than maybe people want you to, because you're going to get to bed on time, you're going to be able to do your night routine, your morning routine, and you know that you're going to feel good the next day with your decision making, do it. If you said that you're going to post on social media at least 2 times a week, don't be overzealous when you're making those goals, by the way. Like, start small. Like, if you said you're going to post 2 times a week, do it. Because every time we don't do it, we erode at our trust.
Mhm.
And then we're left wondering why not only our life is the way it is and we don't feel good about it, but also we wonder why, like, certain things keep happening to us. And it's because we're
Yeah.
allowing them, you know? So make it small, make it so small, make it super manageable. What tiny actions are you doing to honor yourself? Start there.
Yeah. No, you said it well. And I say it over and over and over again to my clients and just about anybody else I'm in a coaching space with. Like, we build self-confidence by keeping our promises to ourselves, because we're building that rapport with ourselves over and over and over again. It's like little mini deposits into our own bank account with ourselves.
Yeah.
Every time you say you're going to post on social media and you actually do it and follow through, you're building that rapport, you're building that self belief. And I'm hearing you say you're likely to take bigger risks with the stuff you're posting. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, like, if you, again, are doing these things and you're building this trust within yourself, you're expanding your comfort zone. And
Mhm.
so, what you're going to then feel more comfortable doing down the road is going to look a whole lot different than what you feel comfortable doing now. You know what I mean? Like, this has been true for me, right? Like, I post on social media for myself now, uh, at least 3 to 4 times a day. And that's just for me. That's not even for like my clients, because I take on social media clients too. That's just for me.
Yeah.
And a few years ago, like, it was even hard for me to post on social media every day, like once on one
Yeah.
platform. You know what I mean? And I'm posting on a minimum of 3. So it's one of those things where like as I've done it consistently, as I've kept my word to myself, I've developed this understanding that I am the person that does this thing. So when I'm the person that can post every day, I'm the person that can show up and create an impact and be consistent every single day. Like I'm just adding to that on whatever I choose to do from there. You know what I mean? Like it's already in my wiring, in my being. My body knows it to be true because I've done it. I've kept that word to myself. And so anything I add on top of that doesn't feel as lofty. It doesn't feel as scary, you know? So yeah, it just builds. It builds and builds and builds. It, in my experience, like changes who we know ourselves to be. It changes our ability, you know, like our belief within our body that we're capable of doing something. And so the more you can do it, like it's only gonna get better from there.
I love it. Everything Sabrina is saying today, y'all, is pure gold, and it's 100% true. You know, and again, Sabrina, thank you for being on here. You know, you're talking about that personal work, showing up for yourself, doing the thing you say you're going to do. And let's just be honest, it's pretty hard to do that on a social media platform in which there's infinite people for you to compare yourself to.
Yeah.
How do you continue to show up in that way and not derail yourself with the comparison?
This is something that I hear so many people struggle with. I personally am not immune to it either. I definitely have had different points in time within my career so far where I've looked at someone else and said like, damn, I wish I was them. Or, you know what I mean? Like, oh, I should be doing it like that because they're doing it like that. Um, Even like the, you know, like the jealousy, which is just one of those things that also hinders progress, right? Because we're putting so much energy into somebody else that we're taking it away from ourselves. Not immune, imperfect too. As I think we can all do in our human experiences, right? Like we're constantly looking out for the next thing, which could be a person in this case. And I think when we can refocus ourselves and like I said, refocus our energy back to us and say truly like we are the only person we're in competition with. We are the only person that we get to live with, you know, our choices, all of that kind of stuff, that we can then move forward and not be as almost like either starstruck or like distracted by what
Hmm.
everybody else is doing, you know. Again, that is easier said than done, obviously.
Sure.
Something that I really like to do when I'm scrolling is either have like pep talks with myself, which is quite literally like, oh, I really like the way that person is doing that thing, instead of, damn, I wish I was doing that, or damn, I should have been doing, you know, like it's just the kind of quality of conversation that I'm having with myself is different. If I feel that desire come up to be
Hmm.
like somebody or to be doing something that I'm seeing someone else do, I use that almost as fuel, and not in the way that I'm in competition with them, but more in the way that, oh wow, they gave me some valuable information about myself because my reaction to that thing told me a hell of a lot of who I want to be. You
Yeah.
know? And if I'm listening, right? Because our emotions are here to tell us stuff. So if I'm
Mm.
listening to what's coming up for me, I have the ability to then use that. But if I only let it sit in this place of kind of like negativity and like festering, then I don't really use it as the opportunity and possibility that it could be to like really support me in creating the next thing, you know?
Yeah.
Um, I think sometimes we get into this line of thinking too, where we think like because someone else has done something, we can't also do it. And I just don't think that's true. Like it's actually
Sure.
just not. Like there's so many different variations of things. And again, like if you decide to do something that's slightly similar to something someone else is doing, like you're going to put your personal touch on it. It's going to be authentic to you. And the person that resonates with you the most is going to be drawn to that. I always say, like, we're responsible for our corners of the world, and the people who we have in our corners are going to resonate with us. And there are some people, even if they're big name, that are not going to resonate with, your neighbor or your brother the same way you can. But if you choose to step into the thing and make it yours, do it the way you are going to do it, the way only you can do it, then you have the possibility of changing those people's lives. But you have to step up and take that versus just sitting here and being like, well, they got it, like that, like bystander syndrome where it's like, oh, somebody else's responsibility. Like, no, it's yours. It's yours. Like, you can have it. You can have it. You're the only person that says that you can't. So instead of, again, using that energy and like putting it toward like being jealous or like wanting this other thing that this someone has, comparing yourself, like, don't sweat it. Like, put it back into you. Fill your cup back up.
Yo, this is so good, y'all. Like, I'm sitting over here speechless. Like, oh man, I feel like we could continue to, just dive in on this over and over and over again. And this episode would probably be 3 hours long, but
Perhaps.
you know, Sabrina, you are, a fountain of knowledge here on social media, on showing up authentically, owning your voice, owning your personal power. Where can the listeners connect with you on social media?
Yeah, so my main pages are Sabby Artistry, and that's on IG and Facebook, as well as Musings of Mystical Women, and that's on IG and TikTok.
Awesome. And what is the best place you would say for them to get in contact with you directly, whether if it's for social media advice or just to connect with you for yourself, the leader that you are?
Yeah, I would say Instagram, and again, that's Sabby Artistry, SABIARTISTRY, and just message me there, or email sabbyartistry@gmail.com.
I love it. I love it. And, again, I wish we had a bit more time to continue this conversation, but there have been so many nuggets today. Last question I want to ask you, Sabrina, is, what do you want to acknowledge yourself for what you've created, and where are you planning to go next?
This is such a good question. Thank you for asking. I would like to acknowledge myself for the absolute like perseverance and grit that I've had. Like, I've just kept going and going and going. And truly, it's out of service. Like, my desire is to create a lasting, like, large impact, positive impact on the world, and using myself as like the catalyst for that. And I haven't given up on that dream, man. I haven't. And I keep going every single day, even when I do not want to. Because some days I don't want to either. But I do. And yeah, I'm so grateful for the opportunity to be able to support people in the way that I have, and completely just like find joy in that process. So I acknowledge myself for committing to that process.
Beautiful. And where are you going to go from here?
Where am I going to go from here? I would say just like making it bigger and better and pouring more of myself into what I'm doing, pouring more of myself into my clients, and creating that ripple effect in the world by supporting others and finding their voice, finding what makes them unique and lit up and allows them to be of service as well, and just like making it so big and amazing that they are then taking responsibility for their corner of the world, and they're doing some amazing things too.
I love it. And I have no doubt that you will. Well, thank you for being on the show today, Sabrina. And to all the listeners out there, thank you for, tapping in with us. Hope all of this actually was super valuable. I know I got a ton. I felt like Sabrina was talking to me directly. and I'm going to be implementing a lot of this in my business and my relationships moving forward. Sabrina, thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Super excited to connect with everybody.
Thank you.